I guess maybe that's probably what maybe bothers me the most about this whole story is that, here you have a paucity of real reliable media. These two people were acting on what they thought was good faith information. They were doing what was probably the morally right thing to do. They were warning their friends and followers about a potential attack against their children. I mean, if I had this information that I knew was to be correct, it would be sort of incumbent on me to spread this information. But now they're going to sort of, I don't know sort of what the legal charges against them are. I don't, I'm thankfully not an expert in the Mexican legal system, but morally speaking, they seem to have done the virtuous thing.
Exactly, and in any case, the government should have, at that moment, should be monitoring the social networks and pay attention to these kinds of things, check it out, and if it was false information, the government should be the responsible authority to inform and correct this false information, instead of using the criminal law to somehow force people to behave themselves. And legally, this is a terrible case, not only morally. I mean, terrorism and sabotage are pretty radical crimes. This means up to 50 years if they are convicted of both of them. And in order to be accused of terrorism by law, you really need to be intentionally trying to create a situation, simulate a situation of terror, or of course using directly weapons or other means. But if you're doing it in sort of an information way, it would have to be really kind of prove that it was an intentional case. So I think that eventually these people will be out of jail. The problem is that the case may take 2, 3, up till 5 years to actually come to the end. And during this time, these people might just be sitting in jail waiting for their final judgment. And in the end, from a legal perspective, it's pretty clear they will get out free. But it might lead to a situation of them having 5 years of their lives destroyed. And that's, of course, the point, to sort of show, give an exemplary case to Twitter users so that they try to self-censor themselves. And it's definitely a regression in terms of democracy in Mexico.
I think that's fascinating, the idea that they're trying to get Twitter users to self-censor themselves the way that the mainstream media already has. One of the interesting things we found as we were researching this is that the reason we gave at the beginning a timeline of Gilberto Martinez Vera's actual tweets is because the first one we see on this topic came at 10:57 a.m., but people were reporting as early as 9 that morning, almost 2 hours before that they were seeing kids being kidnapped. And even though it turned out not to be true, it seems that there's a lack or a paucity of real credible information to prosecute these people with.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask, I don't want to be too speculative, but we have from Venera, who, kept us informed on this story. She says that Senator Castellón of the PRD party has asked Governor Duarte to remove charges against the Twitter terrorists and remove any provision that could undermine the principles of freedom of expression. Is this a fruitful development, or what do you anticipate?
Well, yes, there have been some political statements, important political statements, particularly by the sort of left opposition. This is a statement by the PRD senator. There's been statements over the last few days around this. The Twitter community itself, of course, has been participating, and some group of politicians has been demanding the release of these suspects. But it's still the Friday after the judge formally indicted these two people on Wednesday or Thursday last week, and on Friday, Governor Duarte, governor of Veracruz, had a very highly publicized meeting on Friday with the president, Calderón. And so it seems like they are pretty much in agreement. The PRI and the PAN, the PAN is the ruling party, Calderón's party. The PRI is Duarte's party, the sort of the old authoritarian party, and they control together about 2/3, a little bit more of the Congress and of the politics in the country. And Calderón is in favor of abusing of the word terrorism. A couple weeks ago, there was an attack on a casino in Monterrey, in which some narcos burned the casino, and he immediately started to call this terrorism. That was a more dangerous and worrisome act than the Twitter case, but I don't think that's terrorism either, and Calderón is using the terror label as well to repress social discontent, and also as a way of inviting the participation of the U.S. military as well, which is another side of this whole issue.
John, you just hit exactly the question I wanted to pose next, which is what is the motivation behind these ideas of categorizing different crimes as terrorism. And I guess, as you're saying, perhaps they could get more leverage from the United States involvement or otherwise. But I'm just wondering about in the domestic political context, is there any advantage to be gained by starting to label more different kinds of activities as under the category of terrorism?
Well, there are two different sides. One the national, one the international. On the national side, well, yeah, it gives the impression of, tough guy tactics, that you're really going after them. It makes the governor, the politicians, seem as if they're really acting against a very dangerous threat. When you say terrorism, it's hard to be against the fight against terror. It's the same thing that happened in the United States and continues to happen about the relationships with the Middle East. And the part about the United States is crucial here, because the United States has been getting much more involved. Each year we get different reports about how the CIA and different sorts of military agents are now directly participating in the war on drugs in Mexico. A few weeks ago, the New York Times revealed that there's a special sort of intelligence sharing base in northern Mexico, which is modeled on the bases which exist in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so the United States and also the United States has been talking about insurgency and terrorism in Mexico for a long time. And this is the sort of the perfect excuse for both the Mexican government and the U.S. government to really talk about increased military intervention in Mexico, which would be very problematic from a perspective of Mexican sovereignty, of course.
Mark, I want to get your thoughts on this, because you started out by telling us about the public health project you were involved in Cameroon just briefly, within the last few weeks. And one of the arguments that's been made about this entire war on drugs is that it should be considered as a public health issue rather than as a issue of, that requires a military response. What's your take on the militarization of this issue of drug trafficking?
It's probably a lot more expensive way to sort of win the war on drugs than investing on programs that reduce demand here in the United States, on drug treatment programs, on any sorts of education programs that make sort of the drug trade less lucrative in the long run. And I think that's probably you're never going to get rid of drugs. You can legalize drugs perhaps, but you're never going to get rid of this sort of source of income for these organized criminal groups. But you can make it probably a little less lucrative.
Now, John, on that same point, I mean, I believe that a number of Latin American presidents, I believe former Mexican President Vicente Fox, former Colombian President Gaviria, came out in the last couple of years and said that there should be at least a consideration of the decriminalization of some of these drugs. Has this taken any traction, or is this a serious conversation on the ground?
Yes, it's a very important report that Gaviria and Fox and Zerillo and Kofi Annan and I think George Soros signed on, and Paul Volcker, a whole wide group of different intellectuals and ex-presidents a few months ago issued a very important report basically calling for an end of the war on drugs. I think they're right. I mean, it makes total sense to conceptualize this, as Mark was saying, as a public health issue. And not see it as a militarized issue. Basically, what we have is an arms race now. The Mexican government has increased their firepower, and so, of course, the narcos and the criminal organized crime in Mexico are increasing their firepower, buying guns, of course, from the United States with money from U.S. drug users. And so this is really a vicious cycle which is never going to end unless we have some sort of more radical change. And so, yes, I think legalization is a very important point. Whether this has gained traction within the political debate here in Mexico, within some groups, yes. Again, the PRD, the leftist opposition party, has been talking about this seriously, although they really only control about a third of both the state level governments and the federal Congress, and both the PRI and the PAN, these two, both the ruling party and the present ruling party and the old ruling party, have not really been willing to talk about this as a serious issue. There's been a movement among intellectuals, civil society, and I think every day as we move forward, society is starting to look for more drastic solutions. One of the advantages, or a positive thing, is that next year there's a presidential election in Mexico. President Calderon is coming to the end of his term. This will be in July of 2012, and so this is going to be an opportunity for the different parties and candidates to actually put forth different agendas, and I hope that at least one or two of them really start talking seriously about this, because then the level of the scale of the violence and the death is really incredible. We have about 50,000 people who have been killed in organized crime or drug-related related activities of the last 5 years. And so it's obviously not working, the solution that Calderon has proposed, and we need to really step forward to think about creating new solutions, I think.
Mark, thank you so much. I'm sorry, John, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been really enlightening. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. An honor and a pleasure.
Absolutely. And thank you, Mark, for your contribution as well. I think we should leave it with a final comment from online.
Yeah, BCAT DC is saying 10 years later, after 9/11 presumably, and all you have to do is call something terrorism, and you can do whatever you want. We see that in Israel, Saudi Arabia, Mexico,
and the United States.
And
there you have it. Thanks so much to all of you for joining us. Remember, you can continue speaking with us about these topics using the hashtag AJStream. As always, we will see you online.